Black woman stopped from entering her own private jet, so she fires the entire crew. She arrived at the airport, ready to board her private jet, but the crew stopped her, refusing to believe she owned it. What happened next left everyone speechless. How would you react if someone denied you access to something that was rightfully yours? Drop a comment with your thoughts and let us know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss out. Dr. Brianna Lawson was no stranger to breaking barriers. As the CEO of Harper Global, a multinational tech firm, she had built her empire through intelligence, resilience, and an unshakable belief in herself. But despite all her success, there were still moments that reminded her how deeply ingrained prejudice could be. This was one of those moments. Brianna arrived at the private airport terminal, ready to board her flight, a trip meant to finalize a major partnership overseas. She was dressed sharply in a navy blue power suit, exuding the confidence of a woman who had earned her place at the top. The terminal was sleek and modern, its marble floors gleaming under the soft glow of chandeliers. Other passengers, mostly wealthy business moguls and celebrities, moved about without a second glance from the staff. Brianna approached the check-in desk, handing over her identification. The attendant, a young woman with a polite but distant demeanor, scanned the details and quickly confirmed her reservation. "Your jet is on the tarmac, Dr. Harper," she said, gesturing toward the private hangar. With a nod of thanks, Brianna strode toward her aircraft, her heels clicking against the polished floor. As she neared the stairs leading up to the jet, a voice stopped her. "Excuse me, miss," a man called out. Brianna turned to see a middle-aged white man in a crisp pilot's uniform. Captain Eric. His expression was one of polite skepticism, but there was something beneath it, something Brianna had seen before. "This area is restricted," he continued, his tone firm but measured. "Passengers aren't allowed on the tarmac without clearance." Brianna raised an eyebrow. "I have clearance," she said evenly, reaching into her purse to pull out her confirmation. Eric barely glanced at it before shaking his head. "There must be some mistake. This is a private flight." "I'm aware," Brianna said, holding his gaze. "It's my flight." A flight attendant had joined him now, her expression mirroring the captain's doubt. "You're saying this is your jet?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "That's exactly what I'm saying," Brianna replied. The weight of their assumptions was almost laughable. A black woman in luxury? Unheard of. A black woman owning a jet? Impossible. Eric sighed, exchanging a glance with the flight attendant. "Look," he said, shifting his stance. "I think you might be confused. This aircraft is scheduled for a Dr. Brianna Lawson." Brianna let the silence stretch for a moment before responding. "That's me." A flicker of shock crossed Eric's face, but it was quickly masked. Instead of apologizing, he doubled down. "There must be an error in the system. Let me check with my team." Brianna's jaw tightened. She had experienced enough moments like this to know exactly what was happening. This wasn't about protocol. This was about power, about who they thought deserved a seat at the table, or in this case, on the plane. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. The private airport terminal exuded exclusivity. Its polished marble floors gleamed under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, and floor-to-ceiling windows framed a pristine view of the private jets lined up on the tarmac. Plush leather seating, gold-accented decor, and the quiet murmur of conversations created an atmosphere of quiet sophistication. Every detail spoke of a world reserved for the wealthy and powerful, a world where convenience was a given, and luxury was an expectation. Dr. Brianna Lawson stepped inside, radiating confidence. She was no stranger to this environment, dressed in a tailored navy blue power suit that accentuated her commanding presence. She walked with the assuredness of a woman who had built her empire from the ground up. Her jet-black hair was styled in an elegant updo, and a pair of diamond studs gleamed subtly against her dark skin. The moment she entered, subtle glances flickered her way. Some passengers barely spared her a second look, engrossed in their own affairs. But others, especially staff, took a moment longer, their eyes filled with something unspoken. Curiosity, doubt, suspicion. She had encountered it all before. At the check-in counter, a uniformed attendant straightened up as Brianna approached. The woman's professional smile was polite, yet it didn't carry the effortless warmth she had displayed toward the previous passengers. "Good evening, ma'am. May I see your identification?" Brianna maintained her composure and reached into her leather handbag, retrieving her passport and flight confirmation. The attendant accepted them, her eyes scanning the documents before shifting toward the computer screen. A pause, a slight hesitation. Then her gaze flickered back up, as if re-evaluating the woman standing in front of her. Dr. Harper. Her tone had changed, the hesitation now mixed with realization. Yes. Brianna's response was firm, though not unkind. A beat passed before the attendant's demeanor adjusted. The practiced smile widened, now carrying a touch of genuine respect. Apologies for the delay, Dr. Harper. Your jet is ready for departure. The crew is making final preparations. Brianna accepted her passport back with a knowing glance. Where do I board? The woman gestured toward a set of glass doors that led directly to the private hangars. Your aircraft is just beyond that gate. A staff member can escort you if you'd like. Brianna shook her head, offering a polite but brief smile. That won't be necessary. I know my way. With that, she turned and strode toward the exit, the slight stiffness in her shoulders the only indication that she had noticed the moment of doubt. It was a small thing, something most people wouldn't have caught, but Brianna always did. As she stepped through the doors onto the private tarmac, the evening air was crisp against her skin. Her jet, sleek and imposing, awaited her. She had been in this world long enough to know that ownership didn't always equate to acceptance. Some people would always need to be reminded, and tonight she was ready to do just that. Brianna strode across the private tarmac, her heels clicking against the pavement as she approached her jet. The aircraft gleamed under the evening lights, its sleek silver body reflecting the fading sunlight. It was a symbol of everything she had built, years of relentless work, sacrifices, and an unshakable will that had carried her to the top. Yet, no matter how high she climbed, the world always found ways to remind her that, to some, she didn't belong. As she neared the stairs leading up to the jet's entrance, a man in a crisp navy blue pilot's uniform stepped into her path. His stance was firm, authoritative. His name tag read Eric, with neatly combed salt and pepper hair and an air of unquestioned authority, a man who had never had his position challenged. "Ma'am," he said, his tone bordering on dismissive. "This is a private flight." Brianna met his gaze evenly, her expression unreadable. "I'm aware." Eric's brow furrowed slightly, the corners of his mouth tightening. "Passengers for this flight have already been accounted for. I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the aircraft." There it was, the assumption. The quiet yet unmistakable suggestion that she was in the wrong place, that she couldn't possibly be the person he was expecting. Brianna exhaled slowly, keeping her voice measured. "I am one of the passengers." Eric's skepticism deepened. "I don't think that's correct." Before she could respond, a second figure emerged from the jet, a flight attendant, a blonde woman in her mid-40s, her uniform neatly pressed. She stopped at the top of the stairs, her eyes flickering between Brianna and Eric, with thinly veiled curiosity. "Everything all right, Captain?" she asked, her voice light but pointed. Eric didn't look away from Brianna. "We have a bit of a mix-up here," he said before turning to the flight attendant. "She's trying to board." The attendant's brows lifted slightly as she took in Brianna's composed stance. "Oh," she said, though there was no warmth in her voice. "Ma'am, are you sure you're at the right jet? This is a chartered flight." Brianna's patience, already stretched thin, began to wear. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. "I'd like you both to take a look at this." She tapped the screen a few times and then held it up for them to see. The email confirmation was clear and irrefutable. Dr. Brianna Lawson, owner. Flight departure, 7:30 p.m. Eric leaned in slightly, his jaw tightening as he read. The flight attendant, too, glanced at the screen before straightening, her expression faltering for the briefest moment. "Ah," Eric said, clearing his throat. "There must have been a miscommunication somewhere." Brianna tilted her head, studying him. "A miscommunication?" she echoed. "Or an assumption?" Neither of them answered immediately. The flight attendant forced a smile, attempting to smooth over the moment. "We just needed to confirm, that's all. We apologize for the confusion." Brianna's gaze remained steady. Confusion is when information is unclear. This wasn't confusion, this was dismissal. Eric's posture stiffened, as if he wasn't used to being called out so directly. "Look, we're just doing our job, Dr. Harper." Brianna let the silence stretch between them before nodding slowly. "I believe you are," she said, "and now I'll be doing mine." Without waiting for a response, she ascended the stairs, stepping onto her jet. If they had doubted her before, they were about to learn just how mistaken they were. Brianna stepped inside the cabin, her sharp gaze scanning the luxurious interior. The leather seats gleamed under the soft overhead lights, the scent of fresh upholstery filling the air. This was her space, her jet, her investment, her achievement. And yet, she had just been treated as if she had no right to be here. Behind her, Captain Eric and the flight attendant hesitated at the entrance, exchanging uneasy glances. It was clear they were still processing the fact that they had misjudged her. Eric was the first to speak. "Dr. Harper, I apologize for the confusion earlier." His voice had shifted, attempting a conciliatory tone. "We weren't expecting you." Brianna turned slowly, arms crossed. "Is that so? Or were you just not expecting someone who looks like me?" The flight attendant's lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to protest, but she said nothing. Eric, on the other hand, straightened his shoulders. "That's not what this is about," he insisted. "It was an honest mistake." Brianna arched a brow. "A mistake? Let's examine that." She stepped forward, her presence commanding. "When I approached the plane, did you ask for my name? Did you ask to see my ticket before assuming I didn't belong?" Eric hesitated. "Well, no," Brianna cut him off. "You didn't. Instead, you dismissed me outright. Not once, but twice. Even after I presented proof, you still doubted me." The tension in the cabin thickened. The flight attendant shifted uncomfortably, her hands clasped in front of her. "I assure you, Dr. Harper, it wasn't personal." Eric tried again. Brianna let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, but it was, because if I had been a white man in a tailored suit, would you have questioned me at all?" Silence. That was her answer. Brianna exhaled sharply and pulled out her phone. "I want the terminal manager here immediately. Now." The flight attendant blinked in surprise. "The manager?" "You heard me," Brianna said coolly. "Since you both claim this was a misunderstanding, let's get a third party involved. I want accountability." Eric's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll call them now." Minutes later, a tall man in a navy suit entered the jet. His name tag read, "Mr. Randall, Terminal Manager." His expression was one of forced politeness, though he quickly sensed the tension in the air. "Dr. Harper," he greeted, offering a professional nod. "I was informed there was a situation." Brianna gestured toward Eric and the flight attendant. "Yes, your crew refused to acknowledge that I, the owner of this jet, had the right to board. They made assumptions based on nothing but their own biases. I want to know, does your terminal condone this kind of behavior?" Lowell's face paled slightly. "Of course not," he said hastily. He turned to Eric. "Captain, is this true?" Eric stiffened. "There was a misunderstanding, sir." "A pattern of misunderstandings," Brianna corrected, "and I refuse to let it slide." Lowell glanced between them, clearly aware of the gravity of the situation. "Dr. Harper, I sincerely apologize for any offense caused." "I don't want apologies," Brianna said sharply. "I want action. I demand accountability." Her voice rang through the cabin, final and unwavering. This wasn't just about a single moment. It was about something much larger, and she was going to make sure they understood that. The cabin was silent, thick with tension, as Mr. Randall, the terminal manager, turned his gaze toward Captain Eric. His expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the weight of the moment. Brianna stood tall, arms crossed, waiting for someone, anyone, to justify what had just happened. Lowell cleared his throat. "Captain Eric, did you or did you not refuse Dr. Harper access to her own jet without proper cause?" Eric shifted uncomfortably but lifted his chin. "Sir, I made a mistake. I genuinely believed there was a misunderstanding. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful." Brianna's eyes flashed. "Yet you were, repeatedly." Eric exhaled sharply. "Look, I've been doing this job for years. I've never had an issue before." Brianna scoffed. "And how many times have you assumed a black woman wasn't supposed to be on board? How many others have you dismissed without a second thought?" The flight attendant, who had been standing quietly beside him, finally spoke. "We weren't trying to be discriminatory. You were just acting on your biases," Brianna interrupted. "And that's exactly the problem." Lowell folded his arms. "Dr. Harper, I take these accusations very seriously. If you feel this crew was out of line, we will conduct an internal review." Brianna let out a humorless laugh. "An internal review? That's corporate speak for, we'll sweep this under the rug." "No, that's not how this is going to work." She straightened, her voice unwavering. "As of this moment, Captain Eric and his crew are dismissed. I refuse to have anyone working on my aircraft who does not respect me. Eric's eyes widened. "You're firing us?" Brianna met his gaze without flinching. "Yes, on the spot." The flight attendant let out a small gasp, while Eric took a step forward, disbelief etched into his face. "This isn't fair," he argued. "I've given years to this job." "And in those years you've clearly learned nothing about respect," Brianna shot back. "Let me be very clear. This isn't just about today. This is about a pattern of behavior that people like me face every day. You made a choice when you assumed I didn't belong. Now I'm making mine." Lowell nodded, looking at Eric. "I'll see to it that you and your crew are escorted from the premises." Eric clenched his jaw, his face turning red, but he said nothing. The flight attendant looked down, regret flickering across her face, but Brianna didn't waver. As they exited, Brianna turned to Lowell. "Ensure my new crew is properly trained. I won't tolerate this happening again." Lowell nodded. "Understood, Dr. Harper." Brianna inhaled deeply, letting the moment settle. This wasn't just about firing a few people, it was about making a statement. Respect was non-negotiable, and she had just proven that to everyone in the room. As the dust settled from the confrontation, Brianna leaned back in her seat, exhaling slowly. The weight of what had happened still pressed on her, but there was no room for regret, only action. The flight would continue with a replacement crew, but for her, this moment was about much more than just a trip. She reached for her phone and dialed her assistant, Morgan. "We need to make some immediate changes," Brianna said firmly. "Draft a policy for Harper Global. Zero tolerance for discrimination, not just internally, but in all partnerships. If any vendor, client, or contractor fails to meet our standards, they're out." Jasmine didn't hesitate. "Understood. I'll get legal on it right away." Brianna knew this was bigger than her own experience. What happened today was just another example of a deep-rooted problem, one that black professionals faced every day. It wasn't enough to fire a few people. The system itself needed fixing. That evening, she sat in her study scrolling through emails when a call from her brother, Nathan, lit up her screen. She answered immediately. "Sis, I heard what happened," Nathan said, his voice brimming with pride. "You handled that exactly how you should have." Brianna sighed. "I don't just want to react, Nathan. I want to change the game. And you will," he assured her. "You already are. You're showing people, especially black women in positions of power, that they don't have to tolerate disrespect, that they belong." His words struck a chord. It wasn't just about her. It was about every black woman who had been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. She thought back to all the times she had been the only black person in the room, forced to prove herself over and over. That ended now. "I'm not stopping here," Brianna said with conviction. "I want real change. More diversity in executive positions, more accountability for discrimination. We can't just talk about it, we have to act." Nathan chuckled. "Now that sounds like the Brianna I know. Keep shaking things up." As the call ended, Brianna opened her laptop and began outlining her next steps. She would use this moment not just as a personal victory, but as a launching point for something bigger. She started drafting an official statement, making it clear that Harper Global would be taking immediate steps toward ensuring diversity and inclusion at all levels. She envisioned mentorship programs, leadership initiatives, and partnerships with other companies committed to equity. Change wasn't just necessary, it was overdue, and she was ready to lead the charge. Brianna knew that firing the crew was only a small step in a much larger battle. True change required more than just individual action, it needed a system-wide shift. She refused to let this be just another incident that faded into the background. Instead, she saw an opportunity to create something lasting. Sitting in her office, she outlined her vision, a Harper Global Diversity and Inclusion Initiative. This wouldn't be a mere corporate statement, it would be a movement. She wanted measurable goals, concrete actions, and undeniable impact. Her first major step? A summit on diversity and inclusion, bringing together corporate leaders, advocates, and professionals from marginalized communities. The event would serve as a platform to address systemic discrimination, share real experiences, and push companies toward actionable commitments. Brianna wasn't interested in empty words. She wanted policies, mentorship programs, and leadership opportunities that would ensure long-term change. She called her executive team together. "This isn't about just us," she told them. "We have a responsibility to make sure opportunities exist for those who have been denied them for too long. Harper Global would commit to increasing Black and minority leadership within its ranks. Internship and mentorship programs would be established to provide young Black professionals with access to high-level careers. Partnering companies would need to meet strict diversity standards, no exceptions. As her plan took shape, Brianna felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had always fought for excellence, but now she was fighting for something bigger: equity, justice, and opportunity for all. This was no longer just about her personal experience, it was about ensuring no one else had to go through the same thing. Real change was coming, and Brianna Harper was leading the charge. This was never just about a flight. It was about respect, dignity, and the right to exist in any space without question. Brianna refused to let ignorance go unchallenged. She didn't just demand change, she became the force behind it. Firing the crew wasn't the victory. The real fight was against the system that allowed this behavior to exist. She would not settle for apologies or empty promises. This moment was a declaration. Discrimination had no place in her world. Through Harper Global, she would build something bigger than herself, a legacy of justice, a structure of accountability. This wasn't just about one woman or one company. It was about rewriting the rules so that the next generation wouldn't have to fight the same battles. Brianna wasn't asking for respect. She was taking it.